That's fantastic. Well, then we're going to roll with it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I used to do like live and 5, and we do the
do the
5,
countdown?
4, and then we do the silent 3, 2, 1.
And then you throw it out.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, that was live and 5. That was my thing. Yeah.
No, a lot of people don't like the sound of their voice. I know, me too. It's a tough thing.
I think it's a feedback thing mainly because you get used to the sound of your own voice internally, right? Because your voice is rattling all the bones and stuff, and so it's a different thing. You're hearing a different version of your own voice, but then when you hear it outside of your own body, right? It's a different filtering that happens, I think, and I don't know, right? Because I don't know the science of it, the physiology of it, but it just feels like a foreigner, but you recognize undertones in your own voice. And that's the weird part, is because it's familiar and you're not expecting it to, because typically your external stimuli is from an external source, not from an internal source. So you're using an internal source to give an external stimuli, and I think it messes me up.
You've spent a lot of time on it, but I mean, tell us, it's because you had or have a podcast. And
I did have.
You've spent time with this.
I have. Yeah.
I can't stop fidgeting with this sometimes, but
yeah, and that's the thing too, because a lot of it has to do with like spatial situation, right? Like, how am I occupying space? I couldn't tell you how many times we'd be doing this number, and you hit the microphone, right? And then knowing that I'm the guy that's got to fix it on the back end. Trying to get that kind of boom and that drawn out, it's hard.
Do you go through this?
Oh, it's hard.
Not super often.
It's been all right?
We haven't had anybody fully hit it. It's usually just like a table tap. I'll usually just leave it in there.
Yeah. Now that I've said that, no, it's the boom.
Now you got one.
It's when
Now
you
you
hit
got
the boom, because the boom,
Oh.
yeah, when you hit the boom, like any part of it except the screen, it's got like this resonant deep end boom, and what happens is the sound waves stretch out a lot further than what you want to clip it for, and so even if you try to take do a noise reduction on it, right, where you take a sample of that boom and then you try to filter it out, you technically have to be able to sample the whole boom clip in order to get it out. But the problem is you end up capturing part of the soundbite you want to keep, and then it ends up filtering that out. So you have to be very selective, and there's a lot of cleanup. And so if I do hit the boom, I'm just going to I apologize, because I know what I'm doing, right? But this occupying space, right? It's that situational awareness. So I'm going to use that as a segue into the industry, right? Because we talk about situational awareness all the time, don't we?
Okay. You have to.
You have to.
Absolutely.
We have to talk about our situational awareness. Am I aware of my surroundings?
That's right.
Right?
How many variables are in that question alone?
Site specific. It depends on where my 2 feet are on planet Earth. I had a civil guy on a
geography, weather, time, month. Oh my goodness.
Everything comes in, and that's the difficult part of the risk assessment and the site assessment, or a hazard assessment, is that you have to take into account all of these variables. And then when conditions change, you have to reaccount for all of those variables and then represent any mitigation methods that may be associated with the work. So it's this constant reevaluation, in the same way that, like, as we do work, that environmental and situational awareness, it could literally save your life. Right. And I've been in multiple industries and segments at this point in my life where there have been instances where my ability to be aware of my surroundings has saved my life. Because, construction's wild, man.
So many moving parts, equipment moving, people moving, trucks moving, cranes, land, dirt, all the things.
Correct. And then you've got some entities that come and go, right? It's not the same crew every day on the site throughout the same project. And then when we talk about these projects, most people think that, oh gosh, they threw up that wind project really quick.
Who's they?
Who's they, and what is really quick, right? I mean, what are we baselining this against, right? Oh man, they threw up that house next door really quick. Yeah, but how much planning went into being able to execute that plan safely and up to the quality standard?
Yeah.
So my first QA/QC project was up in Fresno, and I had just come back. It was like 2017.
Solar.
Yep, 205 megawatt DC. It was a Tranquility 8, which was up off of Derrick Avenue. Up there, it was like Derrick and Monterey. It was new construction, and it was on an accelerated schedule. And I cannot sing the praises in relation to situational awareness and what's happening on the site and planning and coordination. I cannot sing the praises of the construction management team that was there on that site. We literally built, or they literally built this site in about half the time it normally takes. And it had a lot to do with their very strategic and then planning and organization. Their traffic control plan is still the best that I've seen to date.
Interesting.
Right? And their pods were probably among the most organized. Good EPCs out there, right? So when people are talking about like the contentiousness of projects and the EPC this and that, there's good ones out there, like the couple that I'm thinking of off the top of my head. And then there's some bad ones out there. I was on my first wind project was in Indiana. It was in eastern Indiana, over by the Ohio border. And I was running along for the owner's team, and I was confirming utility locations before they started doing road work. And so it was an asphalt remediation project. We replaced like 38 miles of crane walk damage, right, throughout the county. And and when I got out there, it's a big rural area, right? Single construction crew. So you think to yourself, having been experienced on a construction site where there's a lot more things happening, that, like, oh, I don't have to be as situationally aware because there's less going on. That is not the truth, right? Because just because I have because I have fewer of one variable doesn't mean I don't have more of another one. And that ties back into that risk assessment and that situational awareness. Right? We have to know, and I call this, like, when I approach anything in work, I should probably apply this more in life, but in work, I trained myself to think in terms of the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how. And you can ask anybody at the organization that I work for currently, I talk about that a lot. So when I want to know something in life, I ask those 6 questions, and I call them Juan's 6 whas. It's something they taught us in grade school. Right? I didn't come up with it. It wasn't my idea. I just kind of took it and adapted it and took it on as my own. But I asked those things, right? Hey, do you want to do a podcast? Okay, I know the what, right? What about the who, the what, the where, the when, the why? And what about the other questions, right? This helps me assess my environment. It helps me assess the expectations of how I operate inside that environment, right? These are all things that we have to do. It's one of the biggest challenges. Most people that I have come across that are new to the industry, that have been on a site first time, they go through the orientation. It doesn't tell the whole picture, right? It gives you a preview to the picture. The picture is when you've got your 2 boots out there on the ground in the thing. It's different when you're standing on the problem as opposed to away from the problem.
Juan's 6 was.
Juan's 6 was. Like I said, I stole it from his grade school teacher.
Was.
But
I love this. No, I mean, I've heard, yeah. The who, the when, the who, the where, the why, how.
And the when.
When.
Yeah. Who, what, where, when, why, how.
How.
Yeah.
That's
and so I'm trying not to hit the microphone still because of that spatial awareness.
I
right?
don't want that edited. I'd like to hear what it sounds like when you hit it. Very curious about this, so leave it. I want to hear it once. I love this. Situational awareness, and Juan 6 was,
for example,
is a great tagline. And the way that you've just articulated, I mean, I've been to more safety meetings than I could ever imagine. It's like waking up on a Sunday anymore. But I've never heard somebody explain it that way. That's very unique.
Right on.
Oh, man, you did great.
Cool.
No,
this is something I use.
Yes. But we need to share that wider.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because it kind of makes sense. We forget to ask all the questions. Sometimes it's okay. I'm being dispatched to a project. When do I got to be there? So my timing, like some people are going to be hyper focused on when do I report for duty, but then they leave half their kit behind, right? I was on a project in West Texas, okay, and we were about we were about an hour away from our lodging, right? So if you forget stuff at the hotel, it's a problem. It's a logistical problem, right? It leads to downtime, stuff like that. And I was very strict about. Let me rephrase that. I tried to be very strict about PPE. I am not perfect. I've made my mistakes, right? I've seen my shortcomings. I was never perfect 100% of the time. But I was prescient enough and disciplined enough that if I did have somebody that rolled up to my work area and they'd forgotten their PPE, I don't care if it's 15 minutes down the road, you do not go and do battle. Right? If you don't bring your brain bucket, you aren't going onto my battlefield.
True. And
it was a strict rule. And this poor guy, new to the industry, running a little bit late. I get it. Doo-doo happens, but he showed up to work without the tools that he needed to do the work.
Right.
And so he ended up catching up on administrative things that were his responsibilities that he had not fulfilled outside of the scope of work. And that's what he did that day. Now, I promise you this, for the duration of that project, overall it was like a 16-week project, he never forgot his brain bucket or his PPE again because he wanted to go to battle. But every single time he showed up ready for work, right, you can tell that he asked himself, okay, who has to be there? I do. Where am I going? 293 Mendel Road, right? Like, who am I going with, right? Who's driving, right? It's not just the single who. Sometimes it's multiple who's. Right. Sometimes it's multiple whens. And that layered complexity is often what turns us off into understanding that big picture. And so we just go with the flow. Well, going with the flow gets you through the day. Maybe. But asking the questions is what gets you through life. And so in previous iterations, people would ask me often loaded questions where it's like, okay, there's a lot more to this question than you're leading on. There's more to this. And so I'd say, hey, if you got a question, ask it. If you don't ask the questions, you can't know the answers, right?
Do you find, I found that some people aren't asking a question. They're not stopping and asking a question.
They're not. And I'm guilty.
Pick one of your 6 was.
Correct.
Why not? Why aren't they asking one of the was?
What's stopping them?
Why is that?
Them stopping them? Is it a cultural problem? Is it a job site problem? Is it a language barrier? You know, what is this unique thing that I'm coming
I'll tell
across?
you, I didn't ask them very well when I was a young tech, and I'll tell you why. I was very result-oriented and very scared to lose my job.
Correct. And that's a huge source of it. I don't want to ask the question.
I haven't changed being result-oriented. Not so scared about losing the job, but it still stops me a little bit.
It does.
Yeah.
What are the
I don't know if others are like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. For example, right? Like at the beginning of this, I was talking about, before we started recording, focus on the positive, right? There's enough negativity that life brings us just because of the inherent nature of life. Like, let's focus on the positive, right? What are some positive things that we can share with the industry, right? Not because we're trying to sell something, not because we're trying to like put, lipstick on the pig, as they say in the old day, right? But what truly is good or positive about this thing, right? I've been through some things. I've worked for a couple different companies in the industry. I've worked around a bunch of different companies, right? So I've been able to kind of like see like, this is good, maybe not so much. This is different. Doesn't mean it's good or bad, right? But where do I fit into this, right? Who am I in this? And it's a question that I was asking myself before I was coming in here. It's like, what are we going to talk about, okay? What question didn't I ask you? I didn't ask you about topic. So when the guys were asking me,
nor I you.
Correct, right? So we just kind of like trusted one another that there was going to be something. And we also just implicitly trusted one another that not only would there be something, it would be engaging and appropriate. And here we are talking about it, right? But what didn't I do? I didn't ask the question about scope. I wasn't afraid to ask the questions about scope because I've had some level of experience doing this before in some way, shape, or form. That does not make me qualified, right? I don't have any training on this system. Can I operate your system even though that I've got some level of familiarity and experience? No, because I'm not qualified to do this. Why? Because Jacob hasn't trained me on how to use it, right? So no matter how much I have learned, no matter how many questions I have asked, and no matter how many answers I've gotten, am I qualified to do every single thing I come across? No. Right?
You missed the training.
You missed the training, right? So that's one of the whats. That's one of the whats.
You missed the training
that we need to talk about.
But that's how most technicians learn. It's not right, but it is how most learn. I'm not wrong about it.
You're absolutely 100%
And I know you're
correct.
You're a teacher, you're a trainer, and you guys are doing an amazing thing, very unique.
Thank you.
That not enough people are doing in our industry, and it is solar focused. But that there's just shy of 500,000 blue collar workers in this country in renewable energy.
Just in renewable.
I know you're not shuffling 500,000.
Nope.
Through Tehachapi.
Not yet.
Not yet. That's right.
Probably never, but hopefully. You know.
Of course, because you want to connect with all of them and
We
give
want
them
to
the best
connect with
training.
as many as we can.
Most of them get trained on the job.
Absolutely.
On the job. After the hire date, after the onboarding, then we get out there. Let's thank our friends over at Renew Safety, your proactive partner in safety solutions. With comprehensive safety consulting, ensuring compliance with all safety regulations and standards. Expert staffing solutions, providing trained safety professionals tailored to your project's needs. Commitment to sustainability, promoting a safe and sustainable working environment. Contact Renew Safety at info@renewsafety.com and speak to one of their industry experts about their proven track record for safety management on numerous projects. Or perhaps you're looking for construction safety staffing, contractor monitoring, incident investigation, or program development and training. Check out Renew Safety at renewsafety.com.
So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It's totally tied to that.
Yep.
I didn't get any training until I came into renewables. My level of training in construction had more to do with a cultural mindset at the time. Let's put it that way. So when I was growing up around here, I've had a shovel in my hand since I was 6 years old. Right? I got pictures of me cleaning out footings with my dad at 6 years old. Okay.
Awesome.
Had a trowel in my hand since I was 12. Right. I joined the workforce very, very early. Started paying taxes, had a tax-paying job when I was 13 years old. I would ride my bicycle from Cummings Valley out to Sky Mountain Resort, and I was a housekeeper.
Uncle Sam loves you.
I've been working for a long time.
Yeah.
But what I didn't get through a lot of the construction is a formal training. It was always OJV, right? Or OJV. It was always OTJ, right? And so a lot of things that happened to me before I got into renewables could have and should have been avoided, right? I didn't know I had rights to safety until I got into renewables. I didn't know I had the right to, I never even heard the term stop work authority before I got into renewables. Because I grew up in a family business, right? And so without taking 5 hours to kind of, kind of show the viewers or explain what that means, is sometimes in a family business, it's familial considerations and things that stop you from asking the questions or making a stand. And so, my dad, God rest his soul, he did me good, man. He taught me how to work. He taught me not how to give up. He taught me how not to give up. He taught me how to have heart in everything that I did. And so far, I've been able to hopefully implement that in my professional career. The fact that I'm still walking and working today, I think, is a testament to that. When I was 38 years old, I had to have a spinal fusion. And what had happened was I was working at heights on a scaffolding system. I was pumping concrete. We didn't have fall arrests or fall harnesses because it's not the way things were done around here at that time. Okay, and this is like circa 2000, 2001. And again, I don't want to by deductive logic, oh God, your dad didn't know nothing about safety. No, it's not that he didn't know anything about safety. It's that he didn't know as much as maybe we all needed to know about safety.
That's right.
And because of competitive pricing around here, there wasn't any wiggle room for things like safety, right? So I find myself on this project, and I'd been pumping concrete and finishing concrete for a long time up until this point, right? So it's not like I was the new guy on the job. I wasn't. I was an apprentice at that point for sure. Journeyman level, knowledge, capabilities, that would be about the equivalent where I was at. And we had about 300 foot of line out, and it was a little trailer pump, right? And if you know anything about concrete pumping, you know it is an unforgiving you-know-what to start with. And so we're pumping this mud, and we were grouting a wall. And so it was over on the 10th fairway off of Birkdale Court in Stallion Springs. And I'll never forget this site. There's a big-ass oak tree, pardon my French. Edit that out if you want. Leave it if you want. I don't care.
The oak tree?
No. Well, you can take. Oh, no. Leave the oak tree. You're going to get in trouble for that for sure, especially around here. But anyways, there's this oak tree, and we had our temporary water there, and we had our, pump down like that. And everything's good, man. We got this wall grouted up to almost the very top to where you puddle in bolts and, stinger in the last of it to consolidate the mud. And so I'm pumping along and I got the hose over my left shoulder, And again, no PPE, no sunblock, none of that stuff. You're just working, right? No big deal. Well, it's a big deal. It's never a big deal. It's always not a big deal until it is.
Mm-hmm.
And what was happening was I had a guy down at the bottom, 15 feet below us, and he was tending the hose. Now, 300 feet of line is a lot of line. And when you pump concrete downhill versus uphill, it acts differently.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was on a downhill slope, you can get separation in your grout inside the line because gravity pulls it and kind of separates it, kind of like turds inside there, right? So I think what happened, because I wasn't down there, obviously, is that hose got curled and pinched in between one of them turds. And, of course, it's still stroking and delivering its pneumatic pressure, right?
So you're not getting the coarse material through.
And so what's happening is it's not allowing any pressure to go through. It starts compacting. It starts separating and binding because the aggregate gets separated from the paste. And then you got to plug. Well, again, situational awareness, right? This is all tied to that. I feel the line jerking. Now, I don't know. I'm not a big guy, right? Obviously. I don't have a lot of meat on my shoulder. It's like mostly bone, right? And so bone transmutes sound really, really good. And so I could hear the material coursing, and a pump has a rhythm, and that sound has a rhythm, and I could hear the rhythm changing. I didn't know why it was changing, but I could hear it was changing, and then it started shaking. And that shaking...
little fear?
Told me that the line was shaking in my hands, which means it was building up pressure.
Yeah.
I looked up to whistle at my dad to kill the control because he had the control, right? And by the time I finished whistling, the rest of the pressure that had built up in the line, it exceeded that pinch. And when it gave it like DC power and straightened out that line. And when it straightened the line, I'm holding on to it, and it lifted me and cracked me like a whip. Well, we had the framers up on the subfloor on the house part of it because this was on the garage side. I guess it would be the southwest corner. And they said that they heard the whistle and they looked over. And by the time they looked over, I was already off the scaffolding, in the air, and going backwards. Now, because I was on a slope, mind you, I'm on like, two tiers of scaffolding, and then I think there was a shorty.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm at least 2 levels of scaffolding. So, I mean, feet levels at least 12 foot off the ground. Well, I fell further down the slope. And when I fell, I landed like my pelvic girdle was like this. And I didn't hit straight on like my ass or my back, kind of hit at an angle. So it started with the tailbone. And when I hit, man, I just, right? So on my end of it, it looked like whistle and then sky, ground, black. Okay.
How old were you?
I was 20 years old.
Okay.
I was 21 or 22. So I was pretty young still, right?
Yeah.
And so, like knocked the farts out of me. And the guy that was up puddling and consolidating, old Jesse, God rest his soul, he come flying down the scaffolding, man. And he's telling me in Spanish, sit down, siéntate, Juan, siéntate. And I'm laying there and I'm all goobered up, right? And I'm going, levántame, like, I'm already sat down, man, get me up.
That's right.
So I tell him in Spanish, we got mud, get me up. We need to finish this job. So he gets me up, climb up the scaffolding. My dad's going, what happened? And I just wind this up. We're going to get this done, right? Mm. So we wind it up. We finish pumping it, and I go to clean out line. So we're cleaning out line. And about that time, I'm doing this, like, whoa. Like, man, that really rang my bell. And I'll never forget, I was sitting on my butt with my hands on my knees, you know what I mean? And I'm over by that temporary water supply underneath that oak tree, and I'm looking out across the golf course, and I'm looking out towards like Bold Venture, on the opposite side of the valley there. And I remember thinking, ooh, man, that was bad, right? So we had a second pump job that day. Well, I didn't go to that second pump job. I went home. And then I went back to work the next day. And then I worked for 8 months until I couldn't walk. And we were working 6-7 days a week because the economy was just booming at that time. Yeah. And so I was working on a project in Santa Ynez for some friends of the family. And we got home one weekend because we'd go down during the week, stay there, and then come home on the weekend. Come home on the weekend, and I woke up, it was like a Sunday morning. Sunday mornings just aren't fun for me. But I wake up on a Sunday morning, and shit, I could feel my legs. I couldn't move them. I feel everything. I couldn't move nothing, dude.
Oh, man.
And so I get on the horn and I called my folks and I'm like, hey, man, I need some help. I need you to come and get me and take me to the doctor, you know? And so they took me to Dr. Richard Sotil. And I was probably in his office for 3, maybe 4 hours. And him and his staff, they very slowly checked me out first, took x-rays and did all the right things, you know? And by the time I left there, I was walking like a 90-year-old man, but I was walking. But because I got patched up, right, being the dumb young guy full of rum,
Back
right?
to work.
I'm back to work.
Yeah.
And then for the next 16, 17 years, you know, I had a really good chiropractor. I went to a different chiropractor because Richard had retired. And she'd even come to the job site when I'd goober myself up, and she'd kind of patch me up, and then I'd go right back to it. And she'd tell me time and time again, every single time she'd come to the job site, man, she'd go, Juan, what are you doing, dude? Like, you're swole out like this and you're laying block? Like, what are you doing? I'm just trying to get things done, right? I am a 46-year-old man living in a 65-year-old man's body.
Yeah.
There's no badge of courage for that. I don't
Nope.
get a pin. I don't get a retirement because of it. There's no like, oh, I'm not a hero. Okay, cool. That day I got the job done. But how many jobs am I not going to be able to do when I'm 60? How many little side projects am I not going to be able to do when I'm 65? That's the reality as a consequence. I'll never go on a roller coaster ever again, man. I'll never be able to go skydiving.
Mm-hmm.
There are limitations to my life, some of which I never cared about anyway, but that's not the point. The point is I don't have the right to exercise that freedom because I gave up my right to work safely for any reason. I don't care if it's a family reason. You're like, oh God, nobody says no to dad. I sure as hell didn't like saying no to my dad.
Sure.
I was terrified of him for a long time,
Sure.
But my dad was my buddy, right? And so it's hard sometimes for me to say like, yeah, we didn't have safety. You know what I mean? Because I feel like, ooh, is that a knock on the old man? No, it's not. It's a knock on the fact that there have been laws since 1970. Just starting with OSHA, just thinking on OSHA alone, 1926, right? OSHA has been a law since 8 years before I was even born.
You weren't thinking about that when you were 20?
And I wasn't thinking about OSHA when I was 20.
Probably not.
I wasn't.
Of course not. No 20-year-old is.
Nobody is,
No.
right? And so the power of the training, right, is in its efficacy, right? Show me a video once. Okay, cool. Ask me about the video I saw like a year from now. I'm not going to remember anything from that.
We were talking about this the other day about, did you remember in high school, do you remember watching Red Asphalt?
Absolutely.
All right.
Red
I found
Asphalt
some-
1 through 4.
That's it.
Dude, Serge and I talk about Red Asphalt.
Okay, we need this in our industry. I don't know if society too sensitive to see some bad videos and things like that. But
But here's the thing.
boy, that woke me up about driving.
Right. So when we see industry injuries, right? Like for example, I don't even know if I've got it here, but when we see like really gory stuff, like full disclosure, right? I think I can talk about this. But when I develop content where I'm pulling images of like thermal contact burns and entry wounds and stuff, I typically lean on OSHA because chances are somebody's already seen that before.
Sure.
But when it comes, I still, like in our instructor notes and stuff, we're like, hey, this is some graphic content. Some viewers might be, disturbed by this. You have the freedom to walk away and not
This
have
cracks
to
me up.
see it.
You're supposed to be disturbed by it.
But you're supposed to be disturbed
This
by
is
it.
the point of looking at it so that you're disturbed by it.
And so finding that balance is a really difficult thing because, in trying to appeal to a very, very diverse audience that you can't quantify because they're not, through your doors yet. You know what I mean? Like,
It was a requirement for me. It was a requirement for you.
Yep.
Just to graduate school.
Just to get through school.
That's it.
Yep.
To get a driver's license.
And in order
the
to
simple
do so,
things.
we
I don't know.
had to do that.
To me, we're missing some of that. And I'm a fan of, and I don't even want to find me a gory picture, and I will enjoy it.
So it's not gory so much as that's my spine, man.
Oh, this is your spine.
This is my
That's it?
spine. Absolutely.
Oh, man, what do you got in there? That's some metal.
So I've got 4 titanium bolts and 2 titanium rods
Those are
in
screws
my
I'm looking at.
Oh yeah. So think about, I don't know if you've ever seen
Some nice bracketry, buddy.
Yes, I got some hard.
Yeah.
But I
They let
could've-
you on airplanes?
They do. So the titanium, and this is one of the, again, we ask the question. So when I'm working with my surgeon, by the way, I don't know if he's retired yet, but Dr. Farouz Amjadi is like legitimately the best orthopedic surgeon that anybody could ask for. Two reasons. Not only is he really good at what he does, he holds the patient accountable for the success of their outcome. And from the gate, straight told me real things I needed to know about the risk I was taking in doing this surgery. And then he straight told me, he was like, hey, look, man, we've talked about my part of the formula, but let's talk about your responsibilities.
Well, let's let our viewers know, if you don't pay attention to safety, Juan's got a doctor recommendation for you.
I do.
Well, there you go.
If you don't pay attention to safety, I have a recommendation on some folks and resources that you could go to get more information about said safety.
Yeah.
Now,
and good doctor recommendations.
So 16 years later, right? I wake up Memorial Day morning. This was 2016. So I'd only been in the industry for about a year. It was actually just shy of a year. Okay. I'm coming up on my 10-year pretty soon. And I woke up one morning. I had just moved some light furniture around the house, did a 2-man lift with my brother, right? Because I was trying to okay, I'm learning things, right? Like, oh, I can do it smarter, right?
Yeah.
And so he come over and he helped me move just this light little 2-seat couch, no big deal. Man, Sunday morning I woke up, and because of that chronic damage that I've been doing to myself time and time and time again, day after day, and just doing it the wrong way, I woke up and all of the annular fibers that hold your disc intact, they had finally just over time undone themselves like thread or like a zipper, right? So I always think about a disc like a pumpkin. Like pumpkins have where it kind of pleats in, and they've got that really thick fibrous rope that goes from top to bottom. That's what's holding all of that mass together. And I always think about your discs in your spine like that. And what happened was just over time, I had so many herniations and bulges and stuff that annular fiber that holds it together just finally gave up. And I woke up bone on bone at 2 different levels. So I should have had a 3-level surgery, but I ended up with a 2-level surgery, which means I know before I grab a piece of good, God's good earth and cover up for the rest of eternity, that I'm going to have another surgery, or maybe even 3, because we've only addressed a small portion of the entire overall picture. The result of this is because I was not an advocate for my personal safety,
right,
regardless as to how much environmental or spatial awareness I may or may not have exercised throughout my career. It did not save me. That in and of itself did not save me, because it's the whole formula together. Do I have the familiarity? Do I have the experience? Do I have the knowledge of the system? Have I had the formal training for that equipment or that specific system? Just because I ran a Nolan 540, for a long time, 15 years, I was, fully engaged, does not mean I can go to a 545 or a 560 or a Millennium 2 series, because they're configured slightly differently. They use different motors. They have different surge chambers and stuff. I am not a qualified individual. I have to have training. How do we get training? We go to places that provide it, or our employer provides it for us, right? What's the definition of a QEW?
Qualified electrical
worker. Qualified
So-
electrical worker.
You don't always have to answer, where do I get the training or how, but you do have to ask the question, how can I get some training?
Correct.
Where can I get some training?
And
really, I just got to ask. And you said stop work authority, and we've been working on some terms, and a good friend of mine, a respected safety professional, he says it's not authority, it's responsibility. It's stop work responsibility. Forget having authority. You are responsible to stop
work, and that's true.
This is your job to stop. You don't just have the authority to. You have the responsibility
to exercise.
Yeah,
so I like that, because it's okay, I have the authority. Cool. I do nothing. There has to be action.
We've also been working on, and this rings so true for Altair, because we work on start work authority, stop work responsibility. Start work authority. What does this mean? You're showing up with your gear, the tools, parts, materials, whatever it is, on time. You know what your job is for the day, and you've been to so many sites. You have your kickoff meeting, your stretch and bend, your safety, and then it can kind of wane a little bit, right? So we say you have the authority to go to work. You don't have to wait to be told.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah,
And,
because that also implies that
folks
you
are
guys
thinking about what they're doing ahead of time, not just showing up and going, "Tell me what to do."
but
Right?
it also implies that you guys have vetted you're giving them authority to move forward, right? And so that tells me, right? Not trying to dissect it or anything, but that tells me that somebody's checking.
Well, giving somebody authority, which is power, empowers the person to make their own decisions. So every individual is given the power to make their own decisions, meaning I don't have to wait to be told. I know what I have to go do. My partner knows. We have everything. What are we doing? No, you have the power. You're empowered to do it.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's silly not to. But everybody, I mean, not everybody, but when you're a technician, you're a technician. You're not just a tool, right? You're not a tool. You're a technician. This is a vocation.
Yes, right.
That's right. Go to work. It's fine.
It's a trade.
Go do what you do. It absolutely is
It's a trade. It's a skilled trade.
A trade, a vocation, a lifelong career. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
So that's why I'm loving stop work responsibility.
I like that.
It rings so true. And it doesn't get confused with our tagline and motto we've been working on with Start Work Authority.
No, I like
To
that.
empower
Start
people.
Work Authority.
I'd like to take this time to thank another one of our wonderful sponsors, Podge Engineering. Podge Engineering, making wind and solar all we know it can be. Are your renewable energy assets underperforming or not performing at all? Did you expect many years of longevity and they're failing on you now? Podge LLC offers many customized, engineered products and solutions to get these assets back on track. Podge Engineering also performs root cause analysis, engineering services, procurement, and construction. Visit podge.org. That's PADGE.org. Remember Podge, making wind and solar all we know it can be.
I actually had a conversation internally this week where we were working on this internal thing, and I was like, hey, because the question was asked, is this something that we're going to participate in? And I go, well, realistically, because it directly affects you, in a perfect world, I would love to give you that agency and that authority to maintain your lane. If this is your thing, then instead of me having to do it every time, right? Like, can't we just empower you? Do you want to be empowered to take care of this, right? I'm okay with letting people be empowered to do things and have autonomy. Right? I didn't have a lot of autonomy because the way that we were, trained growing up is, man, somebody was watching you the whole time, right? But that's how I got good at my craft. I think one of the things about getting into this industry folks need to understand is that it is a skilled trade. It is a technical trade. And any relative skill that you get is only achieved through multiple rounds of repetition, right? It takes time. And I find that, especially in the last 10 years of my life, time flies because there's a lot going on in that small amount of time, especially in the projects that we manage, right?
Sure.
I've managed projects where I've had 45 people, at least 45, it might be a little bit more, but more than 40 people, under my direct care and supervision, including
big crew,
temporary agency workers and stuff. And that was a huge challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a span of control challenge. I had foremen and stuff, right? So I was able to delegate responsibilities and stuff, but it was a hard challenge. And part of that challenge was getting people to understand that what we do here is a skilled trade and that they're not going to be, God's gift to electrical technical work for a long time, right? Like I ran a shovel for a long time and tied a lot of rebar before I had a mag float or a wooden float stuck into my hand. Right, and it was a lot of sidewalks and edges that I did before I had handled a bull float. It's that repetition and that proof of competency over those multiple repetitions that gets us there. And the truth is in the old world artisanship kind of mindset, you spent a whole lifetime becoming a master at anything.
Sure,
a whole entire lifetime, right? Our society and culture worldwide and globally moves fast all the time, and there's a lot more change happening at any given time than there was before. And I feel like if there was there's so many messages I want to share with, the industry, but be patient. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with those around you who are also learning. Be patient if your company is a newer company, right? Don't cut corners or let them take shortcuts, but be patient, because it takes time to get to where we think we want to go, right? I said this, okay? I did say this when a lot of the guys that I knew that are now very successful in this industry, we all used to work together. And I said this, man, looks like the wild, wild west from over here. You will never see me work in renewables. I said those words out loud to people.
Why?
Because I thought my destiny was concrete.
Ah, okay. You had it all figured out.
Oh, I thought I was going to die with a trowel in my hand, man. That was the mindset at the time, right?
What made the change?
Opportunity.
Okay.
Consequences of my actions. So several years later, so 2014, and I've never told anybody but the fellas at Rise, but again, there's a practical reality and there's a very truthful set of consequences to going through chronic back pain. And I found myself in a very, very dark place in the summer of 2014. I'd finished my degree in 2013. Got a bachelor's of science in applied management from Grand Canyon, and at that, it was like by the time 2014 rolled around, I probably had close to 100 resumes and applications out there, and nothing was grabbing. I wasn't getting traction nowhere. And, didn't have insurance. The economy was in the pooper again. I had, decided not to renew my license, you know what I mean? And so I was dual licensed. So I had a C8 and a D6, and I decided that, I think life's pulling me in a different direction, and I didn't see it being in a good way. And I was contemplating suicide at that point. Because I didn't see a way out, man. I just didn't. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to die with this trowel in my hand and this pain in my back. And I just didn't see a way out. Fast forward a year, one of my colleagues, a guy who worked for me, met very early on in his career. We used to work for the same concrete contractor, and then he worked for me when I went off and spun off and did my own thing. He had gotten into renewables, had been doing it for several years, and he calls me, and I'm way up at the top of Deer Trail, right? I'm on the backside of Deer Trail working on this gentleman's house. Guy was super cool, and I was working for Farrell Lloyd at the time, and we were doing block work and all underground installations, mechanical, like drains and stuff, and laying pipe and stub outs and blah, 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 concrete work. And homie calls me, and he says, "What are you doing after work?" I said, "Well, I'm way up here, so I won't be home for about an hour and a half or so." And I said, "Well, if you want, come on by and put on a pot of coffee. What's up?" Because I knew he was traveling. He says, "I need to run something by you." And I said, "All right, cool." So I get to the house, call him, say, "Come on over, man. I got coffee going." He shows up, and he's got this stack of paperwork like this, man. And he drops it on my desk. And he says, "What is this?" And I go, bituminous material, and I'm seeing different grades of sand and aggregate, and I'm going, "You got into asphalt, bro?" And he's like, "Do you want a job?" I'm like, "Wait, what?" And he goes, "What is that?" I go, "It's a mix design. It's for asphalt." "I didn't know you guys did asphalt." And he goes, "Do you want a job?" And I go, "Dude, I don't do asphalt." Right? And he goes, "You obviously know mix designs in the engineering part of it, and what I'm looking for is somebody that understands that. And with your background in concrete and whatever ACI you have completed to this point, I think you'd be a good candidate. I think you ought to throw your hat, your name in the hat. Get a hold of this guy." And I said, "All right, cool. What's it pay?" So we started talking a little bit, this, that, and the other thing. And so I met his direct report at the local Starbucks, solar director, and he hired me. I got hired on a handshake at a Starbucks.
Love it.
And that's how I got into the industry. And so this was like
what was
May.
The asphalt job for? Were you?
That was Headwaters. That was Headwaters in Eastern Indiana.
Okay.
Yeah, my first owner's rep gig.
Solar.
Yeah, it was wind. It was a wind project. Yeah, crane walk damage. Yeah.
Crane walk damage. On county roads?
County roads, yeah.
Gotcha.
It was a county project. It was cool. Like Randolph County, I can't talk. I cannot say I don't think I can say enough good things about the folks I worked with in Randolph County in Indiana, and Schuler. I'm saying Schuler for people that live in Missouri, but Schuyler County and Adair County in Missouri. Them people took care of me and treated me real good, man.
Oh, fantastic.
They really did. I know there's lots of talk in the industry about, oh, there's lots of contention, and, and I got lots of stories about, how sometimes our projects aren't understood or wanted.
There's a lot of support too.
But there's so much support.
There's more support.
There's
than
more
there
support
is.
than there is. I mean, and it's funny because I've got these stories where it's like, oh God, this was a contentious thing. But I'll tell you what, man, I had this little old Mennonite lady. Her name was Grandma Barb. Man, I hope she's still alive. But Grandma Barb would come in and she'd try to like her and portions of the Amish and Mennonite community over there in those two counties. They really tried to work with the project, and they would try to support the project as much as they possibly could. Now, you guys know just as good as anybody else that living on the road, your diet changes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not for the good.
It's never for the better.
Never for the better.
It's never for the better.
So we share.
You learn about cuisine at gas stations.
We learn about cuisine at gas stations, but we also find the local spots, right?
That's true.
And so when you find the local spots, right, well, that's great for your crew. What about the next crew and the next crew and the next crew? There's this little little hole in the wall place called Rose's in Fort Stockton in West Texas. Dude, I was like dying. I don't know, no knock on Dickey's, but man, I don't think I'll ever eat Dickey's barbecue ever again because I had so much of it in such a short period of time. But then I started driving around and I found this little place. I think their occupancy sign was like 18 or 20. Little teeny tiny hole in the wall Mexican restaurant. I'm sorry, Granny. I'm going to say it. I'm sorry. I went in, checked it out, and was like, ooh, this smells like the place. And you could go in, and you could get a 32-ounce, I think it was a 32-ounce, a soda, a styrofoam soda thing, and she just filled that up with pozole, right? And you take it to go. Well, I had one of the Uncle John Halpin. He was my roomie. He was one of my foremans on this project, and we roomed together. And man, I found this place, and John, he went to Fresno State and got a degree in culinary, so he knows about food, man. Knows about food like no other, right? And I find this place. I'm like, Uncle John, man, I think I found our salvation. I really do. And we popped it open, and next thing you know,
he was loving
everybody's
it.
going there.
Yeah,
You
said, was it Grandma Barbara? Was that the name?
Grandma Barbara.
Grandma Barbara. There are thousands of Grandma Barbaras out there, though. That's the thing.
That's
you
the thing.
found one, and when techs travel and they land in places, and just be a little social. Just be a little social because there are so many good, caring people.
Yep.
Whether it's a grandma or a Barbara or not, but there are so many good, caring people that will help the traveling technicians, the people that are away from home.
That's right.
And help them feel a little welcome.
Yeah. So how does that start? Like, how do we instigate those relationships with the locals, though? Like, how did I get in good with Grandma Barb?
Just be social.
You just
it's
have
going
to be
to
social.
happen. Just go meet people.
What's the mindset of the new guy showing up to the area the first time around, right? How you conduct yourself, how you present yourself, really has a direct impact on how people respond to you.
Conducting is a big deal.
It is.
It is.
So seeing the people come in, I'm like, dude, these guys are bringing in lots of like handmade goods, home cooked goods, and I'm watching, and this gal Rachel, who was really like our main point of contact. I was talking about food one day, and I think I was talking to Monica about food one day, and Rachel was there, and she was dropping off some paperwork from the school district or something, and she says, you like food? Oh man, it doesn't look like it, right? But I do. I love food. I like to cook. I like to eat. I like good food. It's the simple things in life. And she goes, I'm gonna hook you up with Grandma Barb. And I'm like, what does that mean? So Grandma Barb comes in the following week, and we get to talking. And I grew up on 20 acres, right? We had pigs, we had chickens, we had geese, we had rabbits, we had ducks, we had sheep, we had goats, we had horses, we had it all. So like I grew up on goat's milk, so we lived on the farm. So I'm familiar with what farm-raised beef should taste like. I'm familiar with what out of your ground veggies should taste like, right? So Grandma Barb and I are talking, and She said, well, what do you like? And I'm like, what are we going out on? All right, what do you like? And I told her, I said, you know what I haven't had in a long time? And I was renting an apartment, right? So I had an apartment in Kirksville, Missouri, and of course it had a little oven. And I go, honestly, the thing that would help me the most is when I leave here, I've got reports and stuff. So I'm almost always working for about an hour and a half after I get back to the house, right? I need a way to multitask. I said, I got an oven, so I don't know, what do you suggest? She goes, what about pot pies? And I was like, that's it right there. She says, I'll bring you a pot pie. So she comes in like Wednesday, Thursday the following week, and she had tester pies for me, right? She had 2 pot pies. I'm not lying. These pot pies were like 8 inches in diameter, dude. This was no like
real pie.
It was a real pie, right? It was the kind of pie where a guy like me could have some for lunch, you know what I mean, one day, and then have it for dinner again the next and not care. So she brings me these pies in. My dad was kind of a foodie himself. He used to work at a fancy restaurant when he was very, very young down in Redondo Beach. So Dad knows about good cooking, right? So I get this pot pie, and she sets it down in front of me. It's still hot, bro. Like it just got out of her oven, right? And I'm looking, and I cracked the crust, and it was just buttery and flaky. And man, you could just immediately, I'm like, oh God, this is legitimately home baked.
Right.
Like I'm literally getting a home cooked meal, right? And so I took one bite, and I looked at her, and I'm not to be dramatic, but I was like, oh, right? And I looked at her, I said, dude, this is your beef, man. Like you pulled this. You raised this beef. This is all from your garden, isn't it? And when you go along, from WTG to WTG, right, from string road to string road, you'd pass them on the road, and you'd be driving in front of these people's farms, and all of them, they'd be out there, sure. Women and men and kids, and they'd be out there working the veggies, working the farm. I pulled over one day and watched them raise a barn, dude. But how we start off often dictates how we end. And so I told her, I said, how much do you want for these pot pies? I said, I'll buy 2 or 3 a week, guaranteed. She's like, I was talking to the husband, and I got like, $2.45 in materials, and this, that, and the other thing. I said, look, let's just cut to the chase. Can I give you $8 a pie for these? Oh, God, no, that's just way too much. Well, the hell it is.
Yeah.
Right?
It's 2 meals.
It's 2 meals, and it's the quality that it is, right? And so for the duration of my time at that project, because I took a promotion the following January, and then came back here, and I ate like a king.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, Altair Energy Services, and their highly trained, expert technical staff, leveraging decades of renewable power management experience into customized solutions for everyone to meet their energy goals and contribute to a better future for all. Altair's team of hardworking, respected experts are providing full-scope, turnkey repairs, planned and unplanned maintenance, system upgrades, fully autonomous technical crews, supplemental staffing, and customized dynamic scheduling to fit your power production needs. Contact Altair at info@altairenergyservices.com and learn more about their wide range of capabilities across multiple power technologies and platforms.
Okay, that's rare. The Amish country piece isn't so prevalent. That's a little more specialized and rare. But you can still run into great people. You can still find home-cooked meals here and there. You're probably going to learn a lot about gas station cuisine.
Yeah.
But you said something I want to circle back to. It's how you conduct yourself. I said be social, meet people, but it's how you conduct yourself, right? Mind your manners.
That's right.
Right? Be polite. Get to know people. Conform to whatever their culture is.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's been places I've been in certain parts of the country where I walk in, I get a vibe, and I got to turn around and walk out. It's no knock on the people, right? Everybody believes differently.
Sure.
But, we have to be, again, environmentally aware, right? Had I continuously persisted in going to certain places, my outcome probably would have been a little bit different. Was I nasty about the feeling that I had? No. It probably was self-inflicted. I may have perceived something different, right? But instead of creating a problem, right, you put distance between yourself and the problem, right? Because you eliminate the problem. You eliminate the hazard instead of having to mitigate the hazard. What does that sound like, right?
Yeah.
Sounds like the heart of NFPA, right? That sounds like the heart of every every, hazard mitigation process is what is the preferred method to remove myself as far away from the hazard as I possibly can.
Remove yourself. I got to a point where I stopped saying I have a problem and turn on, this is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
How do I solve it?
Yes. Yeah, because
right, you have to separate yourself from it.
Because then it's not objective. You approach it. When we say that, we're showing our bias, right? Mm-hmm. We're showing that I have an attachment to it, right? And so it becomes a subjective assessment as opposed to an objective assessment. But once we start changing our language so that the problem is an objective thing, it's its own thing. It's not my problem, right? If it's my problem, then there's a possessive there, which means either I possess the problem or the problem possesses me.
Or is it you that's the problem? And this is what a lot of people think, right? And
Yep.
This is why I think people struggle. They're like, there's something wrong with me. I don't want to admit it, or I don't want people to know that I haven't solved my problem.
Yep.
It's not your problem. It's not my problem. It is the problem.
Yeah, or it is a problem.
Fine, it's a problem, but it's not, it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's not personal. It's just a problem to solve.
Yeah.
So we define reality, create the new winning solution, execute that plan.
Identify, assess.
Oh, there you go.
Right?
Yeah,
right?
hit the tagline.
Adjust, right?
Yep.
And then go ahead, and once you've made those corrections and adjustments,
right.
we re-execute. And it's difficult because it takes time, right? And I'm sure you've heard this. I'm sure you've said this. Maybe not. I've said this. When you have complex scopes of work, JHAs take time in the morning.
You bet.
Take a lot of time. And if you're doing it right, probably takes more time than the time that I gave to it, right? If we're going to do it the right way. JHAs take time. In my opinion, a job hazard analysis. So a job hazard analysis identifies the known hazards and then demonstrates, just very simply demonstrates how to mitigate those hazards to bring that level of overall hazard down to a manageable or a quote unquote acceptable level. And it goes a bit deeper than that, right? But in general, it's identify what could possibly be a problem or an issue or a hazard to personnel, and then after that, equipment, right? And then, because you don't want to destroy equipment, but the whole purpose is to protect personnel, right? And so we do this assessment and we go, okay, what's the most likely thing and what's the severity, right? So it's like this XY thing where you've got a probability portion of the matrix and then a magnitude,
Sure.
right? So the higher the probability, chances are there's a linear relationship to the magnitude of the potential hazard to personnel, right? And the whole idea is to be able to identify these things within reason as much as we can with the information that we have available, and then identify the methods that we can engage in to get rid of that hazard or mitigate it down to a controllable level, because there are hazards in life that you cannot eliminate 100%. And so if you can't eliminate it, then you go into additional protocols and additional steps to get it down to the most manageable level and the least hazardous level possible, right? And that's how that's how those kinds of documents help us protect personnel. Now, changes in environment, right? In the middle of the day, something changes. Okay, cool. Civil crew is showing up a week earlier than what they were scheduled to, and they got the green light to go ahead and start work. Well, dude, that was not part of the thing. We didn't talk about that, and PODs leading up to this. Now I got to stop and reassess my work area because now I've got multiple crews and crafts in my area, and that changes the game all the way across the board. Right? And when we're talking about electrical safety, it changes it in a very significant way, right? Because then it turns into complex lotto procedures and other things. So there's lots of complexities in our industry, but all of those complexities can be boiled down to a foundation, right? And what is that foundation in terms of safety? It's training, right? I can't know how to be safe until I find out and know how to be safe, right? Like you don't know what you don't know until you know it, and then when you do know it, you figure out that, man, there's more to know, right? A lot of people have told me, man, you know a lot of stuff. And I go, you know what I found out? What my dad said many years ago was true. No matter how much he had learned in his life, he'd always say, there's more to know. Learning is a lifelong process, and it's something that he got from my grandfather. My grandfather was a master mechanic and a machine shop specialist down in the Los Angeles area. Him and my uncle, who was named after him, they had 2 shops. And all the siblings grew up in that shop, and they learned how to work hard, right? Mm-hmm. Well, my grandfather would go to, I think it was Culver City College or Santa Monica College, every couple years, and he would take automotive courses. And people would ask him,
Always learning.
Cruz, man, you are the man. You are the man. Why are you going and taking these courses?
This is why.
And my grandfather would say, things change all the time. Engineering improves, materials change, designs change, configurations change, and I don't want to be left behind. And so to my grandfather's just eternal credit, he had this thing where he had an adaptive mindset, and he had this spatial awareness as to what was going on in his realm, and he was able to respond to it in such a way that he was never behind the curve.
Right.
Right. And I think about that a lot, and I think to myself, a lot of people, there's lots of varying conversations about education. And education does not equal intelligence. Intelligence isn't derived only from education, right? But there are benefits to having an education. My dad was not an educated individual formally. My dad dropped out before he finished the 10th grade, never went back, right? And that's a whole other story. But my dad was one of the smartest people I've ever met to this day. My dad was a very well-read individual. When I was a kid, my sibling can tell you, and so can my cousins, if you had a question about a word. We didn't have a lot of books, right? Like, we didn't grow up, well-to-do, so to speak. But what we did have was we had one nice little, bookshelf. In the middle of that bookshelf, man, Dad saved up and spent a lot of money on a Grolier full set of encyclopedias.
Encyclopedia set. I know this set.
The blue one?
My goodness.
The blue one, right?
Yeah.
So he sprung, and those were not cheap in the 80s, right? But he sprung.
Why do I think mine was maroon? But
yeah, mine was blue.
All right.
So we also had Webster's dictionaries,
Yeah.
right? And a thesaurus, and they're all right there organized. And so when we had questions about things, as kids do, like, hey, Dad, what does this word mean? He'd go, you see them on the books over there? And he said, why do you think I bought all them good books over there? And he says, did you go check the book? And you go, no. Well, go check the book, understand it as much as you can, and then come to me with the questions that you have after going to the book.
Taught you how to solve your own problems?
It taught you how to
What a concept.
solve all your own problems.
Yeah, what a concept.
So, funny enough, in this part of my life, I think about that more than I did the previous 10, 15, 20 years. Because when we talk about being able to go and do work, okay, when we talk about understanding systems and stuff, what do I need? What do I need
Right.
to understand it? I need blueprints. I need schematics. I need documentation. I need referential material, right? Does this mean that I create all of it? No, I only create it in the absence of what should be provided or what is typically provided. But there's typically always documentation in one way, shape, or form to get, right?
You talk about asking the questions. I'm going to add another variable in there. Often I find that people don't know what result and goal they're intending to achieve, right? This sort of a go to work and join the crew. I mean, you don't know where you're headed. You're walking down a path. You don't know what's at the end of this day. You don't know what's the end of the hour. What am I trying to accomplish here, right? You have to back up. And I say that's stop work responsibility.
Yeah.
You don't even know where you're going. I'm sort of the opposite in life, where all I see is the goal. And sometimes all I talk about is the goal as well. And you head this way and get taught how to navigate your path. So I don't know how you got to what does the word mean, but you knew that was the goal.
Yep.
And then Dad helped you figure out how to walk that path.
But he didn't do it for me.
He didn't know, of course.
Yeah.
He taught you how to walk.
Exactly.
That's right. He didn't teach you how to get there.
That's right.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when we have, just as an example, when I was out in the field, how do I do this? Well, I'm glad you asked, right? I am glad you asked.
So glad you asked.
Right? Did you get the documentation?
Yeah.
Right? Do you
What
have questions?
documentation?
Exactly.
Never saw any.
And then you go, okay, all
There's
right.
documentation on this?
Yeah, there is. Matter of
Yeah.
fact, come on over here. I will share with you. Part of the fun that I had, working in QA/QC was there were questions a lot of times where, subcontractor groups would come in and ask questions that, were, obviously related to the scope of the owner, but they would ask questions. And a lot of times I would find myself, and this is the fun part of that, there's a lot of fun that I've had in this industry. There really is. But part of that fun I had on that specific project was being able to work with a bunch of different organizations and a bunch of different people from all over the world, because we had sun-grow products. So we had people from, flying in and out from China. It was a Canadian solar. It was Canadian solar products. So we had people coming back and forth from Guelph, from Canada. And so I got to interact with a lot of people. But my most fun was being able to tear into do that nice, sweet rack of blueprints and help them find the answer, help them find with the information that they were looking for. Because blueprints in and of themselves are like, it's a type of a schematic, and they're layered, they're complex, and they're full of referential material that cross-references and sometimes has circularity. It's not easy. Now, I know, man, before I got into this industry, I was good at blueprints, man. You hand me a set of blueprints and leave me alone from 9 o'clock till about 1 o'clock in the morning, and then
happy.
Just let me play my little music and listen to my oldies, dude. I was happy. And then by the morning, I'd have some really good information, and I'd often find the devil in the details that people didn't even know was there. Like, what do you mean we have to put containment pits? I'm like, yeah, dude, it's an environmental condition right here in general note page, blah, 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 for the concrete. You gotta have a washout pit at every WTG. So how are we gonna do that? Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, this guy, right? I open up electrical schematics, I'm lost. Same skill set, different understanding, different application.
How are you now?
A lot better than what I was 3 years ago.
And I bet the learning curve was pretty quick. If you were already great with blueprint.
I picked up on it pretty quick.
Yeah, it's a different language, but once you learn the language, then you go.
To be honest, I think I sat down during my first year with Rise. I sat down and was working on a project that was related to an SMA product, multiple SMA products. And I would sit there and I would trace power paths to start with, just to see if I understood generally, what was happening and how things worked. And so just taking a literal like highlighting pen, so I had like a blue one and I had like a yellow one and a green one for the AC side, and then it was always blue on the DC side. For whatever reason, my brain says DC power
equals blue. If it works for you, then it works.
Yeah. So I'd go in and I would just trace these circuit diagrams for most of the legacy units, and I'm not saying I'm an expert, because I'm not, but I'm much more familiar with electrical schematics and diagrams because of it. So fast forward, late last year, it's January, I was working on something related to capacitors. Okay. And I don't have the same level of knowledge as some of the folks at Rise when it comes to some of the electrical equipment. Why? Because my background wasn't that, right? Yeah. I've got this DMC-80 Dean Markley amplifier. It was they manufactured them in like 94, 95. Really good, clean amplifier, like high quality amplifier. And I knew when I bought it from Lee's House of Music that it was a good amp. But my chorus channel, I'd hit my chorus channel, and it would have this sound that almost sound like, think of like a vinyl record that's been left out in the heat. It just kind of warps.
Yeah.
And then when it cools off, it's got that warp thing. And if you put the needle on it, it'll follow the track, but it'll go. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a speed dial on that chorus channel, so I can accelerate the chorus effect, or I can keep it down to a minimum. Hmm. Well, as you speed that sound wave up, right, that goes faster. So you go from like a 45 sound, warped record sound to a 78, right? And I always had this problem, always. Never got rid of the amplifier, and I never took it back to get it fixed, right? For whatever reason, this capacitor thing that we were working on reminded me of the stupid amplifier. And I never did get the user manual. So again, back to the blue books on the wall.
Yep.
Okay. What do these dip switches do on the back of my amplifier? I see the switches. I didn't know what they were for before. I know that they're dip switches of some sort now, right? I mean, don't ask the dipstick what dip means, but I know that that's what we call them.
Sure.
Right? I know they do stuff.
And then did you find the manual then, or a schematic?
I had to dig online for about 2 hours, but I found both the user manual and a schematic. And what I found out is that all those dip switches are connected to an onboard module that's got a bunch of capacitors, and there's one capacitor per each one of those switches. And I'm sitting in my garage, and I went, "Oh my God, you were an idiot, right?" Like, I don't know why I didn't piece these things together. So I look at my circuit diagram, bigger and shit, right? Like there's the dip switch, right? There's that's dip. That means switch. That means physical switch. You do this, and it's associated to a capacitor, and there's the capacitor symbol. I got 8 switches, I got 8 capacitors, and they're shown drawn together. And then if I back trace it, right, I can see where it fits in and how it connects to all the other channels on the schematic. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, I am an idiot, right? But I'm not an idiot. I'm a Padawan learner. Even 10 years in, I'm still a Padawan learner. Why? Because there's a lot of stuff that I've never was exposed to, and there's a lot of stuff that we are going to learn in the next 10 to 20 years, right? So it's this perpetual learning process. You don't ever stop learning, Grandpa said. The day a man or a person decides that they know everything that they need to know about anything, you might as well just scratch a thing on the ground and put some dirt on them and call it good. Because they're done. They've checked out.
You can't be done.
It's never done, right? Learning is a lifelong thing.
This episode brought to you by RST Cranes. With over 30 years of experience, RST Cranes brings the industry expertise to every project. From wind turbines to solar inverters, mining operations to industrial construction, RST Cranes is your heavy lift specialist, located in Tehachapi, California, and serving the surrounding areas. Contact RST Cranes for your next project at www.rstcranes.com.
All right, secret of mine, no longer a secret. A surprising excitement of the podcast is it occurred to me after about a month in or so, I'll never stop learning. Like, this is a weird job to go, I can't ever stop learning.
Your job is to not
oh my goodness,
stop learning.
New people like yourself coming up and telling stories I've never heard before, information I didn't know before. Never get to stop learning. I think once it occurred to me, it just brought a sense of joy and excitement that I didn't see coming.
But when you face any given problem now, do you feel a little less intimidated by problems when they come your way?
Yes, I think that came with age.
I think it comes with age and wisdom.
When I was young, no, stress, wanted the result. Yep, needed to get the job done. Absolutely. That came with age.
Yeah, but why? What was the pressure? Get it done now. Why? Because I don't have time to learn. I got to get it done now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, I learned. As a matter of fact, I've told this story before. It was Dave Schuligan that told me go learn. He said go to the library, get a DC theory book, and go to the library and get AC theory book. And one, I was so poor. I would get to the library. I wasn't even checking out books. I was staying at the library and reading, and then put it back on the shelf, and I'd come back and do another chapter the next day. Yeah. No, at 18 years old, 18 and 19 years old, I was at. I don't even know if we have a public library in Tehachapi, but we had one
at that time.
When we were teenagers, we had one.
Yeah, it was over
I
by
spent
Kmart.
a lot of time there. Then we got into hydraulics, and then we got into mechanical theory and load and tensile strength and all the little pieces of a wind turbine that I just thought I better learn this because it's my job.
So
loved it.
My dad started off as a grunt. He used to work for, when he first started, he was working for Bob Mitchell and Bob's Sons. And he worked for them for a long time. Then he worked for Terry Jeton. That's how we say it, Terry Jeton. And he started off with a shovel in his hand, you know. And then he worked for those guys for a long time. Became a really good carpenter. But then he decided, I want to learn. I want to do something else, right? There's more to learn. And they self-performed a lot of concrete stuff. And Dad decided that he wanted to learn. And so what he would do is he'd go and he'd get books.
Yep.
I actually have his books. After he passed, my mom gave me his books, and so I've got the books that my dad first read when he was teaching himself how to be a concrete man and how to do mason work.
Mm.
And the beautiful thing about that, and I can't stress enough that learning is not confined to a building. It's not confined to a period of time in one's life.
No.
But my dad went and got these books, and he became a really good concrete man, a very, very highly skilled mason. And funny enough, My brother and I both we're good. We were good at what we did. My brother had the same kind of artistic approach to doing mason work as my dad. I mean, everything's straight and level, dude. Like there's no brooking on the quality. My brother had worked on some projects. Matter of fact, I think he put up like 26 pallets of brick over at Farrell's house in Stallion Springs, and everything is so straight.
Perfect.
And so perfect that people think they're prefabricated panels that were put up on the house.
Wow.
Right?
Perfect.
So my brother got really good at the masonry stuff, and he went and became a licensed contractor. Now he works out as a supervisor out at Lehigh, right? He can do concrete, and he's great, but his forte, he specialized in the mason work, whereas I went the other way. I do good brickwork, man. I drive by very frequently. There's a project I did where we had to tie in a room addition and make it match the existing brick that had been there since 1980 or something like that.
Make sure it did not look like an addition.
Correct.
Yeah.
And when I drive by, I have to slow down and I have to point it out, and I got to look real hard, man. So it's like we have our own individual levels of competency, but then we have our specialization areas, right? His was mason work and mine was concrete. Truth of the matter is this: I probably will never ever pour concrete professionally ever again in my life.
Sure.
The beauty and the marvel is this: the last time I poured concrete professionally was on a renewable energy project, and it was an EV charging station for the city of Modesto. And
Cool.
It was their bus charging system. And that was the first time I'd ever heard the term AC grid tie in relation to EV charging or battery storage or anything. And it was a difficult project, and there was multiple hands in the pot, and it was a great project. But I got through the first pour. Now, mind you, I want to back this up. Okay, I already had surgery at this time, so I've already got these bolts in my back, right? But to get the job done, I went up there and I poured it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pour round two. I got a hold of my concrete guys and within my network and my colleagues and said, hey, I messed up. I tried something that I should have known better and did know better, knowing that things have changed, right? We adjust to the change, we reassess.
That's right.
That was a bad decision on my part.
You missed one of Juan's 6 was, I believe.
Yeah. Can I do it? Sure. I could. Should I try? No.
Nope.
So round two, we did things a little bit differently. But I have a level of satisfaction, just the concrete guy inside me, because that never goes away, right? That the last time that I professionally stripped and finished concrete was a renewable energy project, right? I did not see a future in 2014, right? I didn't think I was going to be walking on my own 2 feet when I was 50 years old, let alone 40 years old. I thought I was going to be confined to a wheelchair very early on in life. That's not my reality. And the reason my reality is different is because of the people, right? It wasn't my own merit that got me here. I've had a lot of help getting here along the way, right? Including, the company I keep today. Right? But I've had a lot of help. Had that one guy not said, hey, what is this? And do you want the opportunity? I wouldn't be sitting here talking about all these things.
Juan, I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad I'm here too,
my
man.
goodness.
I'm glad.
No, you're tough. There's perseverance there.
But
that's for sure. And there's recognition of opportunity.
Absolutely.
So not everybody would have seen it.
No.
And being able to recognize opportunity and pause and just give it a try.
Because truthfully, the guys that got me into the industry, right, were guys that I was saying to, I'll never get into this industry. But they saw that it was a potential opportunity for me, and they were real enough with me as friends and colleagues and coworkers and students in their own right, because we all learned a lot from one another. But had it not been for that opportunity, it wasn't my degree that got me here. Let me just say it that way. Did it help me stay here? Oh, trust and believe that formal education, that has come in handy.
That's
and I
funny.
would not be the person I am today.
It doesn't help in the beginning, for a number of years. It helps a little later in the career.
That's right.
And it's very powerful.
Yeah.
Juan, we're kind of getting to the end of time. You're going to have to come back. But
Hey, honestly, I was expecting that about a half an hour ago because I'm not watching the time.
I was a little bit, but I mean, you have so many great stories and information to share, but leave us with one. Let me ask you, what piece of advice would you give a new to industry person today? Not young, not old,
new.
doesn't matter, but new to industry, somebody that's considering renewables.
If you're considering renewables, heavily consider it. Be willing to learn.
Willing
Be
to learn.
humble about learning. Be humble. So many people go into a new situation where they're learning a skill set, and there's either a sense of overconfidence or a sense of self-protection and defensiveness about that. I've had to humble myself down a lot in this industry and a lot in the concrete industry before. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to go find them. I'm willing to ask the questions. I don't know all the answers, but I know a lot more questions to ask, and I know a lot more right questions to ask than I did before.
Right.
So it's be willing to learn, and be willing to learn over a long period of time. That is how we gain mastery over anything. That part of humanity has not changed. Just because we run faster, culturally speaking or socially speaking than we did before, doesn't mean that the time it takes to master a skill has changed. That is a human variable. There's a human variable, and that's what, like Bloom, who created Bloom's taxonomy, that's what he was observing. There's all the different ways we gain effective learning, and you know what I mean? How do we do that? Right? And what are those mechanisms that allow us to learn? But you have to be willing to be humble enough to learn perpetually and do it over a long period of time, or else you're going to be a flash in the pan, man.
This is great advice. Let's end with that. We have Juan 6 was.
Juan 6 was.
Be humble and willing.
That's right.
It's nice and simple. That's
It's
great
a good start.
advice.
And everything else kind of falls into
Good
place.
start.
after
I'm
that.
going to keep that just for the rest of my life. I mean, humble and willing will serve you a very long time.
A very long time.
But it is the place to start.
That's where I
That's
started.
the place to start. Me too. Me too.
And that's where most of us start, right? Is a place, whether we know it or not, is a place of humility and a willingness to learn.
Yeah.
Dude, the first time I did IV curve trace testing, bro, I'm like, what are you asking me to do? Like, you want
I
me
had to
put
look
an
that
IV
one up too. That one's newer than when I was attacked.
You want to put an IV in me? Like, what the
Yeah.
hell's happening here? Is this a drug test? Like, what's going on, right? Like, did I win the lottery? But no, just it was a humbling experience. But out of that, I gained a lot of knowledge. And the gentleman that taught me that, I have the utmost respect for to this day, because it's a very specific skill set. But be willing and humble, right? If I wasn't willing, I wouldn't know what I know today.
I love it. That's great advice. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, hey, thank you guys for having me. And I'd come back and do this again in a hot minute.
We're going to make that happen. All right. Take
Very
care.
cool. Absolutely. Thanks, guys.